The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or TMNT, is a unique New York superhero story that makes Spider-Man sound normal. TMNT has a pretty small circle of quirky, dangerous, or otherwise weird characters, but no matter what version you see them in, whether it's the comics, the movies, or the cartoon, they pretty much stay the same. The Turtles' human friend, April O'Neil, manages to get a pretty big change-up every time the series gets rebooted. Was April just made to be so uninteresting that all the writers felt that they needed to add something to her to spice her up? What's the deal with April O'Neil? The Ninja Turtles concept was really inspired by the golden age of superhero comics. It had an urban setting with heroes and masks that used the cover of darkness to keep the city safe. But unlike Marvel or DC characters, the Ninja Turtles were a bit more eccentric or unconventional. They were literally teenage, mutant, ninja turtles. But while most mutations in comics were humans with animal qualities, this was a case of turtles with human qualities. It was a complete 180 of the superhero genre, and to balance them out in a world full of humans, these mutant teenage turtles needed the occasional help of humans they could trust, while keeping their identities a secret. They found their trustworthy humans in Casey Jones and April O'Neil. Casey Jones made sense to include in this crazy vigilante world, but April O'Neil was more of the normal sidekick computer whiz type. Essentially, April was a smart, independent woman with a career. So everything about her was something contrary to the norm of action narratives during the comic's creation, and therefore she would fit right into this crazy world. The 80s also happened to be a big turnover point in the female role, and April was a part of that. TMNT was a series conceived by two comic book artists named Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. With their own publishing company, Mirage Studios, they issued the original TMNT comics from 1984 to 1995 over 2 volumes, which canonically continued in the 2000s. Introduced in TMNT number 2, April was a skilled computer programmer working for a scientist who turned out to be evil. The original version of April turned out to have dark brown, blackish hair. The creators Laird and Eastman were actually unclear on her ethnicity. They had apparently intended on April to be Asian, but Eastman ended up basing her on a black woman that he once knew. And while Laird insisted she was white, Eastman claimed later that April was supposed to be mixed race. This would align more with how she and her hair was actually drawn. So April's boss would use the robots she helped to program against her after finding out his evil plan, and they chase her into the sewer, where 3 of the turtles save her. Basically, her life was never the same after meeting them. Even after she tried to start fresh with her own business, it would get destroyed by Shredder and the Foot Clan. Getting between the Foot Clan and the Turtles becomes a regular thing. She meets another human familiar with the Turtles named Casey Jones, and they become romantically involved, while April eventually helps to raise his child. The volumes 2, 3, and 4 issues get pretty crazy, which includes April getting almost killed by nanobots, becoming a vigilante crime fighter herself, realizing she's a drawing come to life, and moving to Alaska to get as far away from that crazy New York life as possible. Now, while TMNT was initially a pretty dark comic, they would make it more kid-friendly in the late 80s with toys, a video game, and even a long-running cartoon. This 80s style April is the one we all probably think about when thinking April O'Neil, especially with the brownish red hair. The capable independent TV reporter for the Channel 6 News, with her distinct yellow jumpsuit and white boots, she seemed to be inspired by a character from the 70s anime, Lupin III. The cartoon April was less of a damsel in distress and was able to help the turtles more with her access to her job's equipment. Archie Comics would use this version of TMNT for their new line of comics that ran from 1988 to 1995. At first, the comics were just like the cartoon, but eventually the writers would get more creative. They developed April by having her train with Splinter, and she would lose her job at Channel 6 to become a freelance reporter. In a winter 1994 issue, they would even have April mutate into a turtle herself. The ongoing comic publisher now, IDW, had been coming out with issues since 2011 after the franchise was sold to Nickelodeon in 2009. And while cartoons for a younger audience would still get produced, the IDW comics would be a bit more gritty and realistic, similar to the originals from the 80s. This version of April was more similar to the original in being a science student, but in this version, she had also known the Turtles and Splinter before they were mutated, as just regular lab animals. She would take self-defense lessons from this version of Casey Jones, and then eventually decided to work as a reporter. As we go back to the 2000s, to the 2003 TMNT series, this April would start out meeting the Turtles just like she did in the original comic, as a scientist running away from killer robots. They gave her an updated 2000s look, and it was the 2003 series where they'd start giving April and Donatello some chemistry outside of their good friendship, but also have her get married to Casey Jones. After 2009 and Nickelodeon's new acquirement of the franchise, they reboot TMNT with a CGI series in 2012. This April was a lot younger than the ones previous, and it seemed Nick had been reading all those Crazy Archie comic storylines and got the idea to make April a half-human with psychic powers. 2012 TMNT ended up developing April to be even more of a superhero than the Turtles were, even giving her super hearing. This show went on till 2017, and just a year after that, Nickelodeon develops a new series called Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. With a unique new style, everyone got a pretty different design from what people were used to, and in this version, April would be a streetwise African-American teenager with glasses. In the Netflix spin-off movie that came out in 2022, April starts going to college to study journalism, lining her up to have the same career path as Yellow Jumpsuit April. April also holds much of this same design in the unrelated movie reboot to come out in 2023, Mutant Mayhem. Ever since the 80s April, they found a way to make yellow April's signature color, even in the movies. Now about those 90s TMNT movies. Of course they stand out as the first live-action attempt at TMNT, which actually did very well, thanks to those high-quality Jim Henson costumes. The film April is a TV reporter, this time for Channel 3 News, and a damsel in distress character getting caught up with the Foot Clan. She follows the original comic book storyline of having her business destroyed and moving to a farm in Massachusetts, and she develops a hate-love relationship with Casey. In the sequel, she's played by a new actress and continues to help out the Turtles any way she can, while in the third film, she literally just gets transported to feudal Japan, where the Turtles have to save her. The first CGI attempt at Ninja Turtles was the 2007 movie TMNT, and it actually continues from the previous 90s movies. It also connects to the 2003 cartoon airing at that time by having April train ninjutsu from Master Splinter and having her buy that Japanese jumpsuit she is seen in on the final season. Apparently by the end of the 2000s TMNT era, she is also a master of the katana. During post-Nickelodeon era, we got the TMNT movie reboot where Megan Fox played April ONeil. Produced by Michael Bay, the movies seemed heavily influenced by Bay's Transformers action movies, where Megan Fox also played a part in. Her portrayal wasn't really giving April that much at all, outside of a yellow jacket, and she'd get a Golden Raspberry Award for it. This April was actually based on April of the current comic series from IDW, where she was directly responsible for mutating the Turtles and Splinter in the first place. Fox seemed to have gotten the part by association to Michael Bay using her in the first two Transformer films, where she also played a human among huge non-human CGI characters. And this gimmick of using humans, usually a guy and a girl, to co-lead with the non-human lead characters gets used a lot. The modern Sonic the Hedgehog series comes to mind. But while trying to give the audience something to relate to, it tends to make some pretty boring human characters. I mean, the humans shouldn't really be needed to tell the story anyway. It's not their story. It's the story of whatever alien or mutant thing landed on Earth. But I guess if the story takes place on Earth, there's gotta be a human race to interact with. While capitalizing on the 90s popularity of TMNT came an anime OVA in 1996, and even a musical tour that popped off right as the first two movies came out, sponsored by Pizza Hut. As nuts as this franchise is, I think April works best in animation, followed closely by the comics. Well, the whole TMNT concept does. The live action versions always seem to have her be a kind of flat human character that needs saving, but in comics and animation, they tend to make her a lot more interesting. She was always meant to be not your average girl though. Even in the 80s, she was meant to have a post-feminist independent vibe. They would get more lenient with her character as time went on, even writing her as being another mutant. But it's definitely interesting to see how they change it up with her. Because for the most part, the characters have all been the exact same in every version of TMNT. But Rise of the TMNT was a fresh, colorful new take on April and TMNT. It started a new emphasis on the fact that they're in New York City for the most part, and it's a very urban, diverse setting, realistically. So why not try making April, the one human who knows about these mutant turtles, to be an adventurous black kid? It's actually more believable if you think about it. It's also more believable to have her fear for her life and take up ninja training, so she doesn't always need the turtles' help. So yeah. Like, just in case she needs protection in the daytime and the turtles can't really be around like that to save her. Her original comic character had all these realistic traits that made you think that this could really be an actual character living in New York. Like, New York City isn't really known for being quiet and normal. She goes from being a victim to wanting to defend herself while discovering more about herself and eventually moving away from the chaos altogether. Other writers over the years seem to have kind of played on that independent woman aspect while also making her more palatable for younger audiences. Nickelodeon has straight up just made her a teenager, and as often as TMNT gets rebooted and adapted, seeing a new April should be just as understandable as seeing a new actor play Doctor Who. At the end of the day, she is a fictional character who never really had a solid design in the first place. And that actually calls for a lot of creativity to fill in the gaps. Designing and building April up as a character is kinda like artists and filmmakers trying to bring dinosaurs to life on camera when all they've ever seen of one is the bones. Wow. Subscribe for more and I will see ya.